At 4:05 p.m. on January 3rd, 2022, Caleb Williams announced that he would be entering the NCAA transfer portal. At 8 p.m. on that same night, former UCF quarterback and for about 18 days, UCLA quarterback Dillon Gabriel announced that he would be transferring to Oklahoma. In the span of 4 hours, Oklahoma lost and may have just refound their starting quarterback for the next college football season. So what does this mean for the Sooners? In a sea of what seems like endless turnover and constant change, does this news mean anything? And what does the rest of the Oklahoma Center news indicate for this program? I'm Kevin Redfield from the Dropout Sports, and this is the state of Sooner football. Caleb Williams announcing his intention to talk to other schools via the transfer portal is a shocker. That much is for certain. I mean, he was a true freshman who was put in for an at the time first-round quarterback in Spencer Rattler and put his name into the Heisman race in just 7 games. But when you look at the message that Williams put out about his decision, it makes more sense than it would in a headline. He mentions a couple of things, but what catches my eye the most is that he implies that he's going to college to find his path and prepare for the future. He also says that recent changes in the Oklahoma football program have made him consider other places, and that to do so, he has to enter the transfer portal. The reassurance he provided to Sooner Nation at the end of his statement was that he might not leave the program, but after a certain someone stepped in, that might be hard to consider. Now, what does this mean for Caleb and for Oklahoma? Well, first off, I just want to say I completely understand where Caleb is coming from. The example that comes to mind for me when I think about a situation is actually Marcus Mariota, where he had 4 offensive coordinators in 5 seasons as a Titan and was never able to flourish under one system. Couple that with a couple of key offensive weapons leaving and Lincoln Riley leaving for the more defensive-minded Brent Venables, and the situation might have been looking a tad bit bleak from a quarterback's perspective. As for Oklahoma, this move seems like a cherry on top of an already hectic offseason. I'll mention all the major moves later in the video, but Caleb Williams was a star, but they may have just gotten another one. Dillon Gabriel's decision to flip from UCLA to Oklahoma after just 18 days of being a Bruin was shocking as well, to say the least. Just from a logistical standpoint, for someone to decide where they'll be attending college and playing their last 1 or 2 years of football in less than 4 hours is unimaginable. But Dillon Gabriel is more adept at taking on competition and logic than most college quarterbacks. His freshman year, he beat out assumed starter Darriel Mack Jr. at UCF and lit up the gridiron, leading the Knights to a 10-3 record. Going into UCLA, he was likely going to have to compete with last year's starter and potential NFL quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson, as well as other well-established names on the depth chart. And now as he's rolling the dice on a new location, he'll have to deal with a program in the midst of change and the potential return of Caleb Williams. Still, there are some bright spots when it comes to the connection that Gabriel and the Sooners could have, most notably in his relationship with offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby. Lebby was Dillon Gabriel's quarterback coach at UCF during his freshman year, and recently coached Matt Corral up to be one of the most highly touted quarterbacks coming up in this NFL draft. Everywhere Lebby has went, a successful air raid has followed, and with the next step at Oklahoma, that doesn't seem like it's changing. Dillon Gabriel may very well be putting his career and reputation at risk with this bold move. But coming off of a season-ending collarbone injury, I don't get the feeling that Gabriel cares much about those two things. To be completely honest and upfront, Oklahoma is in a mess of a condition right now. But from my perspective, they're in the best mess they could be in. Although they lost their head coach and quarterback guru, they got Brent Venables, one of the best defensive coordinators in the past 5 years who could prepare them for what lies ahead in the SEC. Venables also coached at Oklahoma as a defensive coordinator before hopping onto the Clemson train with Dabo Swinney. So he does have a connection with Sooner Nation. They've lost Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler, but Gabriel coming along almost feels like a cushion for them to fall back on. And even though they've lost a couple of key position guys like Austin Stogner and Jaden Hasselwood, they retain most of their receiving core and have some very talented 4-star tight ends and receivers committing to them in this last recruiting class. And we saw last year how much a true freshman can really do for this Sooners organization. This whole whirlwind of a situation doesn't feel as bad as it should be when looking at it on paper. Losing your young star quarterback and replacing him with a new junior coming off of an injury may seem bad, but Oklahoma has options, whether it be Gabriel, Evers, or someone else. In this era of guys transferring what seems like every minute, you gotta take a step back and sometimes see the bigger picture. The transfer portal is allowing Caleb Williams to talk to other schools and consider his options openly. Conversely, Dillon Gabriel took advantage of this openness and may have just found a new home for himself. And this type of hectic time for Oklahoma might just be what they expected during this transition period from the Big 12 to the SEC. Thank y'all for watching.
Just a bunch of dropouts.